Part of the industrial period is urbanization. You have upper class people who own businesses who simply want to live closer to the businesses that they own, so they're going to live in the cities. You also have wealthy people who don't even own anything, they're just living off of old wealth, meaning they've inherited it from their ancestors. And those people like the cities because of the excitement and things that are available to them as entertainment. And then you have the lower classes who need jobs, particularly farmers who have lost their land due to dropping farm prices. So why are cities so popular? Like I said, jobs. The lower classes have to have jobs to care for their family. The employment opportunities available in urban factories attract those desperate for work, particularly, as I mentioned before, farmers who had lost their land. Culture. The hustle and bustle of the city attract many people who find it new and exciting to have so much to do in one place. This is much more true of the upper class, as the lower class probably can't afford to enjoy those luxuries. Education. This is really important, particularly for the lower classes. Not only did city schools offer a lot more than one-room schoolhouses of the country, but some cities even offered free public education. And this is a great opportunity for the poor who want a better life for the next generation of their family. You can see a photo here of a factory of the late 1800s, early 1900s, and this is the lifeblood of many lower class families. There are problems, however, that go along with urban life. Slums and tenements is one. When you have really low wages, you're not going to be able to afford much. So a tenement is an extremely cramped and low quality living arrangement. And a slum is an entire neighborhood of tenements. There's poor water and sanitation in these neighborhoods. Some tenements had little or even no running water or toilets. Other water and toilet situations are shared by an entire floor of people. That could mean dozens and dozens of people. These poor conditions lead to widespread disease at times because the streets are often covered in human and animal waste, mixed with the factory smoke clouding the air. And lastly, crime. Urban poverty led to increased crime such as burglary, robbery, and murder. In the slums, young boys formed rival gangs that often battled each other with weapons. This is something that will happen when the lower classes are so desperate. This is a photograph of a common area, a square, of tenement housing. And you could imagine that this square, this area, is probably covered in some of the human waste that's being dumped out of the windows because of the lack of running water, sewers, toilets. So a rather disgusting environment. Here's another view of another tenement. You can see the number of apartments that open to this back alley. You can see laundry hanging, children playing, and again, this is not a very attractive environment. Another view of the same tenement back alley is on the upper left, again with laundry hanging, lumber down in the streets, so it probably butts up to a lumber yard. On the upper right is a cramped tenement apartment. If you can count, there are 5 people in this tenement. That is extremely crowded. On the bottom left is an actually pretty luxurious apartment that is probably, maybe a lower class person who shares it with many family members, or a middle class person. It has more than one room. It has a cooking stove. This is actually pretty luxurious. And then on the lower right is a cramped tenement with a family of 5 kids and 2 adults. The social classes of this time period were the working class, where often the whole family, even kids, have to work just so that the family can get by. The middle class might have a white-collar job, which means office work, rather than a blue-collar job, which is factory work. And one of these jobs would probably be able to take care of the family. And then you have the upper class. This is the rich, and usually they're from old wealth, meaning that they inherited their wealth. Rarely did someone go from rags to riches, although Andrew Carnegie went from a cotton mill worker to running Carnegie Seal and selling it for a record price. There is a growing middle class. A common misconception is that the rich got filthy rich and the poor got poorer and poorer. Now, yes, there was a gap between rich and poor that grew, but part of that gap brought people from the lower class up into the middle class. So many people are making a decent living. Social mobility between the working and middle class becomes a lot more possible. However, mobility from the working or middle class to the upper class remains extremely difficult, if not impossible. Part of that growing middle class is the ability for white-collar workers to enjoy their free time. This is the big difference between a working class person and a middle class person. A working class person not only doesn't make much, but needs to work almost constantly. A middle class person has free time. Some examples might be the growth of baseball as the national pastime. Inexpensive games were a great form of entertainment. The popularity of the theater and the movies. The invention and popularity of the radio. The invention of basketball as a source of wintertime exercise for the youths of Springfield, Massachusetts. And the growing popularity of the penny press newspaper as well as the dime novel, meaning that a newspaper cost you a penny and a whole book cost you a dime. All these forms of entertainment are available not only to the wealthy upper class who had always done these things, but to the middle class now as well. I love baseball, and a series of photographs here would probably tell you how much I like the New York Yankees. On the upper left, you can see former Red Sox pitcher and recent Hall of Fame inductee Pedro Martinez threatening Yankee catcher Jorge Posada, telling him, "I'm going to hit you in the head." I'm not a big fan of Pedro Martinez. You can also see a fight on the upper right between Alex Rodriguez of the New York Yankees, and don't take me wrong here, I'm not a big fan of A-Rod, but you can see where when this fight erupted, the Red Sox catcher Jason Varitek, instead of ripping off his helmet and throwing down his glove and fighting like a man, decided he would leave his padding and glove on and fight Rodriguez, who had nothing but his batting helmet. Another reason why I hate Pedro Martinez, in the same game in which he threatened Jorge Posada, he threw elderly Don Zimmer, the bench coach of the New York Yankees, to the ground. During a brawl between the two teams, Zimmer stormed out of the dugout and was running for Martinez, calling him names and such. And instead of avoiding the old man, Martinez grabbed him by each side of the head and threw him to the ground. Both were apologetic for their involvement afterwards, but it still made me hate Pedro Martinez even more. And then on the bottom right, you can see the Red Sox versus Yankees, which is the ultimate rivalry. If I need point out, the Yankees are currently winning an overall World Championships by a margin of, I believe, 27-6. So the Sox do have some catching up to do. Ethnic neighborhoods, to get back to the point at hand. Immigrants often lived in the same neighborhoods as other immigrants from the same home nation. Sometimes it was because they did not yet speak English and they wanted to be around people that they could communicate with. Other times it was because when they moved in first with family who already lived somewhere before they branched out on their own. So it made ethnic neighborhoods very common. An example would be South Boston, which is an Irish neighborhood, or Little Italy in Chicago, which is an Italian neighborhood. Part of urbanization is machine politics and urban mob crime. Machine politics is a situation where after new immigrants come and get a job or a place to live, political bosses expect their votes in every single election. Reason being, they probably provided the help to get those jobs, places to live, etc. There is a political cartoon that depicts Boss Tweed on the bottom left, and Boss Tweed is pictured just to the right of that. Mob crime came up in ethnic neighborhoods, and it means mob and gang warfare in many major cities. Alphonse, better known as Al Capone, came to power in Chicago bootlegging alcohol during the era of Prohibition. You can see the picture of Al Capone with the cigar and the hat, and then you can see a t-shirt which celebrates Al Capone as a gangster. Why, I'm not really sure, but he was quoted as saying, "You can get a lot further with a gun and a kind word than you can with just a kind word." And that really showed the attitude of gangsters, is that if they needed to rule by force, they would. This is the end of the presentation. Please make sure that you take the online quiz. Use your notes. If you've taken good notes and you use them, there's no reason why you can't get a 100 on the quiz. Thank you. See you in class.